Hello, and welcome to In the Roud. Greetings and salutations, dear listeners. My name is Matt Quinn, and this is In the Roud, a folk song podcast. I'll be your host to guide you through the world of traditional folk song as we go through the Roud Index, one song at a time. Each episode will feature two guests, one providing an historical look at the song, while the other will be a singer from the folk music scene to talk about their own version of the song. If you're new to the podcast, or new to folk songs in general, and are a bit unsure as to what the Roud Index is, fret not. If you go back to the very start of this podcast, you'll find an introduction episode where I sat down with Steve Roud and spoke to him about the index, what it is, and why he created it. That's well worth listening to before diving into the episodes themselves. We're now in the middle of Season 1, and this is Episode 4. We're looking at the song labelled Roud 4, which is Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor. Later on, we'll hear from singer Debbie Armour and the version she sings called The Dunbrune Bride. But for now, let's have an historical look at the song from the creator of the Roud Index himself, Steve Roud. Welcome back to the podcast, Steve Roud. Hello.
Hello again.
Hello, good to see you again. Third episode out of 4. You're a regular fixture.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But then, no, I'm enjoying it enormously. There's a good though, because your name is in the podcast, the title, so there is that. Right, so let's dive straight in. This is episode 4, so Roud 4, Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor. What's it all about?
Right, so first of all, Lord Thomas has three main characters. Thomas is pretty standard, he's nearly always called Thomas, but the Fair Eleanor can be Eleanor, can be Annette, can be various other names, but Eleanor, the Americans often call her. And then the third character, as often in ballads, the other character, as it were, doesn't really have a name usually, and she's often called the brown girl or the nut brown maid. We'll come on to that in a minute. It's the plot is pretty standard, right? Pretty much from the beginning, the original broadsides up to now. Although obviously as a ballad there are lots of little bits that are different and a few major plot twists. But what happens is that in some versions it starts off Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor are an item, and then they have some kind of a tiff. It only takes a verse, maybe two, for them to break up, but it sets the scene for what happens later. Lots of versions start at this point where Lord Thomas says to his mum, "Shall I marry Fair Eleanor, who's been my sweetheart for some time, but she's pretty poor, but she's really good looking. Or shall I marry the brown girl, or this other girl who's much richer, but isn't so fair?" And the mother, of course, says, "Marry the rich girl." Now, it then switches to Eleanor's house, and Eleanor is saying to her mum, now sometimes it's the dad or the brother or the sister, but usually the mum. Eleanor's saying to the mum, "Shall I go to Lord Thomas's wedding? Because he's not marrying me, he's marrying the brown girl." And the mother sometimes says, "No, don't go near it." Other times says yes. Anyway, she decides to go. Eleanor decides to go, and of course dresses up in her best, goes in a gold carriage, even though she's been described as being poor. Because she's good looking, basically, she can dress up and everybody she passes by thinks she's a queen. So she arrives at Lord Thomas's house, and the wedding has already taken place usually. And so Fair Eleanor makes some snide remarks to the brown girl, to the new bride, who understandably gets cross. And then it varies a bit as to who stabs who. I think the usual one is the brown girl, the other girl, gets the huff and stabs Eleanor secretly, so that Lord Thomas doesn't notice for a while. Just sort of says to her, "Oh, you're looking a bit pale," and she says, "Yes, because your bride has just stabbed me," and she sort of then dies. Really, Lord Thomas gets cross and kills the brown girl, either stabs her or attacks her with his sword and kicks her head against the wall, which a lot of versions don't include. And then Lord Thomas commits suicide. So they're all dead.
The end.
Nearly the end, yes.
The end.
In other versions, it's Eleanor that commits suicide first, and then Lord Thomas does. But they all end up dead anyway. But as I say, it depends on who stabs who first, depending on which version you're in. And then, of course, there's the inevitable. They were buried in one grave because they were lovers, which is a bit mean on the brown girl that she gets buried in with her rival. So that's the basic story, and it, as I say, it's pretty much the same across all the hundreds of versions.
Okay. So it's a reverse story in a way. It starts with the happily ever after, and goes downhill from there.
Well, yes, that's right. And it is the classic love triangle. That's one of the reasons, I suppose, why the song has been popular, is that people do recognize, okay, we don't go around stabbing each other quite so often, but people do recognize the love triangle thing. And it's about lords and ladies, which a lot of the child ballads are about.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So it is vicarious living, as it were. It's a costume drama.
Sure.
And again, that's why it's popular. We should mention here the brown girl. That's a problem with modern singers, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why a lot of singers don't sing it nowadays, because we take brown to mean, racial, that she's black in effect, or non-white. There's no evidence that that's what it means in the early versions. In a lot of sources where people are referred to like, he's brown or she's brown, it means the color of their hair. I mean, fair Eleanor could mean that she's fair-haired, or it could mean fair meaning pretty. It's,
Yeah.
fair made. But often in older sources, because, sorry, I'm waffling here, but because there was a class distinction between people with fair skin and people who worked outdoors. Working class people had sunburnt faces. Posh people didn't. Posh women in particular spent a lot of time avoiding the sun and looking what we would call pale. But it's very much a class distinction here rather than a race one.
Sure, yeah.
However, having said that, of course, in America, where you're singing about the brown girl, there may well be different connotations. The song is sometimes called The Brown Girl in America.
Would it have anything to do with the kind of the cleanliness of their clothes as well? The upper class people have, their clothes would be washed more regularly, I suppose, maybe, or
It could be, but I don't think so in this case, because the brown girl is actually the richer of the two. So
you did say that, yes,
yeah,
yes.
she's not going to be sort of ragged and stuff.
That is true. That is true.
And even fair Eleanor, who is the poorer of the two, is still upper class. She's still lords and ladies kind of thing. So it's a moot point whether the singers, over the centuries, whether the singers read all of this into it or not. But certainly it's a bit of a problem for modern singers because she's referred to as the brown girl. And when fair Eleanor taunts her, she makes a point of saying, that you are wondrous brown.
Okay, that's
So
a crucial
there, there
line,
is
I guess. Yeah,
there's a bit of a problem there.
sure. So this is you've used the word popular quite a few times already. This is really over the years quite a popular song then, quite
Yes,
widespread.
one of the major. This is child 73. Which should have. I don't know if I said that at the beginning. The child number is important as well as the round number. Over the years, it's been collected a lot. It's one of the top 5 or 6 child ballads um, in terms of collected versions. Not so often in Ireland or Scotland. Quite popular in England. Lots of versions collected. Lots of versions printed on broadsides, but particularly popular in USA and Canada.
Okay.
My index has hundreds of versions from North America. So,
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
oddly enough, it's often the case that a country that prides itself on not having kings and queens and lords and ladies, they do like singing about them. Um, again, it's a costume drama. That's why.
I mean, yeah, Downton Abbey is phenomenally popular in America, as and over
Yeah,
here, as I
especially
proved.
especially
Anyway,
when they stab each other. Anyway, Child himself gives 8 different versions, but Bronson, who prints the tunes of the child ballads, gives 147
wow.
different tunes. So there's enough there to keep you going if you're interested in the tunes. The earliest, so going on to the actual origins, the earliest versions, as always, are broadsides printed in London. So, as always, the first evidence comes from England, although the first collected versions come from Scotland. Now, the earliest broadside we've got is called The Unfortunate Forester. Lord Thomas is often referred to as a forester. And that doesn't mean a gatekeeper. That means that, the person in charge of the king's forests kind of thing. So he's an upper class forester, not a gatekeeper. Um, the Unfortunate Forester, or Fair Eleanor's Tragedy. And that comes from about 1680s, somewhere around there. A lot of our ballads come in about that time, the second half of the 17th century. That's when we first hear of them. And that's partly because that's when they were first printed, to be honest.
Right.
The first Scottish version uh, comes in the 1760s. And Child actually says, and I quote, the Scottish traditional copy, ... is far superior and one of the most beautiful of our ballads, and indeed of all ballads. So Child really rated this one, partly because it has a good story and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. A lot of ballads don't tell you what you really need to know. They leave bits out. It's one of their charms, but this one really does tell you from start to finish. It's a very satisfying story. After the 1680s is the origin, collected in Scotland in the 1760s. Then by the 19th century, it's printed by just about every broadside printer there is. Obviously popular enough for it to stay in the um, in the folk repertoire, as it were.
Yeah,
And
sure.
when Cecil Sharp and all of that crew went out, they found it quite often. So it continued in popularity. But oddly enough, there's not that many recorded versions from Britain. When I say recorded, I mean sound recordings. There's lots written down, um, but there's not nearly as many as one would think, considering how popular it was in the folk world, in the traditional world.
Okay.
As I say, dozens of American recordings. Probably in my index, there's probably 100 different audio files of American versions.
Do we know? I say, do we? Do you know how far back you can trace it in the Americas?
I haven't looked that up, but offhand, so I would have said right back into the 18th century, certainly. I mean, we have so little information for
Yeah,
what
yeah.
people were singing earlier than that. But certainly by the time Cecil Sharp went to the Appalachians, 1916, you couldn't make a move without bumping into that particular ballad. It was so popular. There's dozens of them.
Wow. Yeah.
It must have been around for quite some time. So you're going to ask me to tell you about some of the recordings. As I say, there's not that many in England. Bob Copper version, although it's not one of the sort of famous Copper songs that have been passed down in the family, as far as I know.
Yes, because that turns up on his LP that's just him singing solo, isn't it? So it's
Yes,
obviously
that's
one of
right.
his numbers.
But his dad, Jim Copper, James, there is a recording of him singing one verse, so it's possible that Bob learnt the tune from his dad and the first verse and then filled it in from elsewhere. So you should be able to play Jim Copper, which is quite unusual. We don't have many recordings of the previous generation, the Copper family.
Excellent.
Caroline Hughes, the traveller singer from the West Country, used to sing it, and there are recordings of her. And Charlie Wills, also from down that way, Dorset, I think, sings a good version too. And then from America, Gene Ritchie, who sang a lot of the, in inverted commas, Appalachian ballads. Alan Lomax recorded her. And Mike Yates recorded a chap called Doug Wallin. And that was published on a Musical Traditions collection of Mike Yates. But as I said, there are dozens of American versions. So all you do is go to my index, put in Roud 4, audio to get the sound files, and USA, and you can get all of them all lined up for your delectation.
Whole world at your fingertips.
That's right, yes. And I think, as I've implied all along, that on this one, there's not an awful lot of change there's not a lot of development. The story stays pretty much the same. Bits get left out. And the earliest version we've got on Broadside is 30 verses long. So it's unlikely that many people are going to want to, sing it for 30 verses. But that's partly because of incremental repetition. In other words, it starts off, Lord Thomas asks his mother, shall I marry the brown girl or Lord Fair Eleanor? And the mother says, marry the brown girl. Then he asks his sister. Then he asks his brother. And each one answers. So that's 6 verses before we even got to him making a decision.
I guess all you need to know in the song is that he makes the decision rather than...
That's right. We don't have that kind of patience anymore. Sometimes I wish we did, because if you hear it sung well, repetition like that does build up tension. It builds up expectation.
Absolutely, yeah.
But we watch television now. We don't expect things to, the same scene 4 times with a different character saying the same thing. So, as always with these ballads, the early versions are much longer, and the later ones have stripped away some of the extra bits. But sometimes we lose something by stripping away those extra bits. I think we make it too short and sweet, as it were. But the 19th century broadside printers had much smaller pages to fit their songs on. One of the reasons why these things were cut down, because they had to fit onto a smaller page, because that's the way the pages came. It's not very romantic, but that's true. That it's sometimes the practicalities. And as I say, the who stabs who at the end, the Lord Thomas kicking the brown girl's head against the wall, is not a nice image, so that
indeed
has often been left out. I mean, he certainly kills her, but the added indignity is
Yes,
left out.
that's
So it's
that's
small
rather
details like that that are left out. The actual
that's
story, I suspect, has stayed remarkably the same.
yes, that is a rather extreme detail. So I guess one of the only things that changes a lot is the name of the woman, Fair Eleanor, Fair Annette, etc.
Yes.
Ellen, you know.
Yeah, but they're all pretty similar. It doesn't change to Fair Mary, for instance. It's
Yes,
always
it's always some sort of version of Eleanor, Ellen, Annette.
and normally these things have to keep the same number of syllables and the stress pattern, as it were. Now, Annette is slightly different, and the Scottish versions that I can think of often have Annette, but the English and American ones have a longer name, Eleanor, Elenda, because that's what fits the rhythm of the song, basically.
Okay,
Again, you can change the names as much as you like, as long as they still fit with the meter and still fit with the tune.
of course, yeah. No Harry Cox version? I can't
No,
ask you this one.
not that I know of. I'm sure he knew at least the first verse. Harry knew everything.
Knew everything. I'm going to ask you that every time if you don't mention it.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there anything else you want to mention, or is that the crux of the matter,
I think we've pretty well nailed Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor,
so to speak?
so to speak. Yes.
Yes. Right. Well, okay. We'll leave it there. Because we're going to hear from Debbie Armour and her version she sings later on. So we'll see you once more in a few weeks' time for your final contribution for this season. But yeah, for the time being, thanks very much, Steve.
Well, thanks for having me, as always.
A huge thanks once again to Steve Roud for the historical side of Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor. We're now at the halfway point in the episode, so we'll just take a minute or so to listen to a few snippets of different versions sung by traditional singers. What you're going to hear now is a snippet of Lord Thomas, first sung by Bob Copper and then by his father Jim Copper, Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor from Carolyn Hughes, Lord Thomas from Charlie Wills, Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor from Jean Ritchie, and Fair Ellen from Bradley Kincaid.
Lord Thomas, he was a bold forester, and the keeper of our Lord's deer. Fair Eleanor being a young woman, Lord Thomas, he loved her so dear. Lord Thomas, he loved her so dear. Come riddle me, mother, Lord Thomas, he said, come riddle me all at one, whether I shall have fair Eleanor, or bring the brown girl home, or bring the brown girl home.
Lord Thomas, he was a bold forester, and the keeper of our Lord's deer. Sweet Eleanor being a fair woman, Lord Thomas, he loved her so dear. Lord Thomas, he loved her so dear.
Oh, wasn't Lord Thomas the cleverest young fellow that ever the sun shone on? Oh, fair Eleanor, she got houses in land, the brown girl, she got none. And once you come to Fair Ellen's wedding to see the bride girl wed, well, when they come back from Fair Ellen's wedding, the brown girl, she sat there. Lord Thomas said round with his broadsword aside, he said, that's my true love there.
Lord Thomas, she cried, what is thy bride? The dark girl over there. Well, you could add the fairest young girl that ever trod English ground.
Oh, mother, come riddle it down. Come riddle two hearts as one. Say, must I marry fair Eleanor, or bring the brown girl home? advice I can give you, my son, is go bring me the brown girl home.
Oh, father and mother, come tell me this riddle, come tell it all to me. The brown girl, she has house and land, fair Ellen, she has none. Then my advice to you, dear son, is to bring the brown girl home. He dressed himself in cloth so fine, put on a mantle in green, and every village that he rode through, he's taken to be some king.
And you can find the links to those tracks and the albums from which they came in the episode notes. On to the second half then. I sat down with singer Debbie Armour to get her thoughts on Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor and to talk about her version, The Dunbrune Bride. Well, welcome to In the Roud, Debbie Armour. Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
How you doing? You all right?
I'm good. Listen, I love doing podcasts. It's like my favourite thing to do.
Excellent. You can stay at home and do them, isn't it wonderful?
Yeah.
You said last week to Lizzie, it's a pleasure to be here, but here is my house, so it's a pleasure to be in my house.
Yep. Yeah. Well,
and you're in a new house, aren't you? You are.
I'm just about to move, so it's not really a pleasure to be in this house. It's just like a.
Oh, I
mountain.
see. This is the house you're moving out of.
Yeah, this is the house we're moving out of. Yeah.
Well, exciting times. Or
yeah.
not.
I'm going to have my own studio in the new house.
Oh, amazing.
It's very exciting.
It's what we all want.
A room of one's own.
Indeed, indeed so. Right, let's jump in. Round 4. How Time Flies. Round 4. Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor. First of all, though, tell us a bit about yourself, your history of folk music. I mean, how did you come to folk music, if you indeed came to folk music?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of people would say that the work that I make isn't necessarily folk music. Although I would argue that I only use traditional material, and traditional music is full of written material. So who's the real guy, Matt? That's what I want to know. Anyway,
a debate for another time, probably.
Indeed, that's one for the pub.
And that's your podcast. That's what it is. That's you should do a podcast
my
about
podcast
that.
is called "Who's the Real Guy?"
Who's the real guy? That's right. That's what your podcast should be called.
Whose output is real? Anyway, yeah. So I have been singing traditional songs since I was a wee girl, and I grew up on the Isle of Mull, just off the west coast of Scotland, and I joined the Gaelic choir there when I was 9 or 10, and I used to compete in the mod every year and sing at the Céilís and do all that kind of stuff. And then when I was in my late teens, I took some vocal lessons and some vocal training, and the first thing that my singing teacher said to me was that she was going to quote unquote beat the Gaelic out of me.
Sounds nasty.
Well, I think that there's a very particular way of singing, a very particular style of singing that's valued, and particularly in the competition circuit, that a lot of voice teachers find objectionable. Although I think there's much more diversity of sound now than there used to be when I was a wee girl.
Yes, I had some pushback from my classical singing teachers at college about the fact that I sang in a very, in inverted commas, folk voice.
Yeah.
Which is just, my natural voice,
Well, that's the whole thing of it, isn't it? I think that there's maybe, well, anyway, that's another conversation.
Indeed, yes.
Yes. So I stopped singing traditional music for a long time, and then I kind of came back to music more formally in a community setting, and I was a community song leader for a long, long, long time. And in that practice, I sort of rediscovered my love of traditional music because it's so good for teaching unaccompanied, which is what I really love to do and what I really value. I really value unaccompanied singing. And I really love to give people the opportunity to do unaccompanied singing. There's such a massive sense of achievement in it when you facilitate somebody to do it. Someone who doesn't consider themselves a singer, it's quite powerful to not have a piano or a band or a backing track or whatever to stand behind and just to be your own selves singing together as friends. I think that's quite a powerful thing. So obviously, naturally, I used a lot of folk and traditional music, and then I decided to take it a bit more seriously, I don't know, maybe like 10 years ago. And I got back into performing as an individual. And then I started a band with my pal Gail in 2018, and that's called Bird Ellen. And we use traditional song as a foundation to build kind of conceptual sonic works that invite you to consider the tradition in a contemporary setting and consider what the tradition's got to offer in terms of like resonance and space and architecture and archetype and all of these sorts of things that we like to go deep. So that's what I do now. Bird Ellen is my sort of primary recorded and performance output, and I still do the odd bit here and there, and very once in a while I still get invited to come and do a gig completely unaccompanied and unamplified and just sing traditional songs, Kaylee style, and that's my very, very, very favourite thing to do.
Oh, amazing. Yes, I love doing that as well. It doesn't happen often, but
I think it's quite challenging for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even in a folk club.
No safety net,
Well, not for the performer.
There's no safety net.
For the
audience.
For the audience. No, for real. I think people are quite challenged by it.
Yeah.
Even in the folk circuit, I think people are a bit like...
Yeah, a whole evening of it from a performer is... Yeah, you have to pay attention as an audience member.
Right, as a performer, you also need to like bring your A game, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of people are quite reticent about it as a form. But I love it and will impose it on anybody's folk club at the drop of a hat. Haha.
Absolutely, yes. I even though I bring instruments to solo gigs at folk clubs and stuff, I will try and do as much unaccompanied stuff as possible.
Yeah, it's good.
Just because, But yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, I spoke about that with Lizzie Hardingham last week on the podcast. We talked about unaccompanied singing, and yeah, it's such an amazing thing.
Sure is.
Well, let's get back to Roud 4, Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember your first kind of exposure, as it were, to this song? Your first meeting?
I do. This is one of the very first long form ballads, maybe in the first like 4 or 5 long form ballads that I ever learned in English. And it would have been about 10 years ago. Alistair Roberts sent me a recording of Gordina McCulloch from the School of Scottish Studies Digital Archive site, Tupperandulchish, of her singing it live, and he said, I think that you should try and sing this. And I was like, are you mental? This is the greatest thing I've ever heard. And I feel like I shouldn't. I feel like no one should try and sing this.
There's certain, leave it alone. It's there, and it should stay.
We're at a peak here, and her introduction is so wonderful as well. But yeah, but I did learn it. And I performed it at the Glasgow Ballad Workshop a long, long time ago, and I was so afraid, but I did it. And then I never recorded it until like last year. So yeah, I've known it for a long, long time, and it's gone through. It was funny to come back to the source recording to do this because I think that mine is really faithful, but it's not. I'm doing something with the melody that makes it sound really kind of minery and doomy, and I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's just how I feel about it. I'm not sure. Anyway.
But yes, I remember the feeling of that feeling when you first start singing long ballads out in front of people, and the trick is not to relax when you get to the last 3 verses, because then you'll forget it.
I mean, it's muckle, this one as well. It's like 17 verses, 18 verses, something like that. Not the most muckle. And I feel like now it goes along at a fair clip. It's quite eventful. There's not a lot of like repetition in the version that I sing anyway. There's not a lot of like, should I do this, person A? Should I do this, person B? Should I do this, person C? No, you shouldn't, says person A. No, you shouldn't, says person B. No, you should. You know, there's not a lot of that. Every verse turns the story along. The version that I sing anyway. So I feel like it goes along.
Yes, exactly. My dad once said about that kind of thing. Life's too short to sort of sing all the different bits. Just get the plot and you know, move it along a bit.
I do like the sort of prevalence of the rule of 3. You know, like establish the form, repeat the form with a twist, right? That's how you turn the corner. Like, and you know, that's what happens in comedy, and it's what happens in ballads, and there is something really satisfying about it in certain circumstances. But I think for you to ask the same question of lots and lots of different people, and for them all to say the same thing.
I mean, it does. It's a consensus.
It's really handy if you can't remember the rest of the verses, though. It gives you a good couple of minutes to get your shit together.
Yes, can't remember what happens next. So he goes off and asks his sister or his mother and whoever else. You could just come up with 10 more verses. He goes and asks his third cousin twice removed. Just keep it going until you remember what comes next. Ask the horse, yes. Need more talking horses in folk songs.
For sure.
And so, certainly on the podcast, this is the first proper big ballad we've come to, because the first 3 can be called ballads in some respects, but they're not this kind of song. And certainly it's the kind of song that John Bowden was joking about in episode 1 about this happened, that happened, this other happens, and then they all die. The end.
Classic. Yeah, it's classic. And I live for the drama. I love the big songs where obdidies. That's my favourite. The darker, the better. The more depressing, the better.
Exactly. The more depressing, the better. And actually, people always joke about, I don't really hear lots of depressing songs, but I've sung some depressing songs on tours I do with my duo partner George Sansom, and there's sometimes they're the ones that go down the best.
People love it. If you're into folk music, then you like depressing songs. It's a given, I would say. And I really don't like it when people apologise for the material. I really don't like it when people are like, oh, sorry, this is another one about everyone being miserable and dying. I'm like, well, didn't sing it then. Like, don't say sorry for it.
Yeah, but you should be like,
own it.
Here's another depressing one. Yeah.
Right? Here's one where everything that happens here is it's like EastEnders. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's always doing an EastEnders at weddings and all that kind of thing. People love it. EastEnders Christmas special's like the most depressing thing on television. Anyway, it's a pet peeve of mine.
Here's one where all but one person dies. You know, it's a slight variant.
Yeah.
In this one, the horse lives though, but the horse can't talk. So
So yeah, this is from the imagined point of view of the horse.
Exactly. So, but the version that you sing for this, I know later on we'll hear the version that you recorded for me for this podcast. But you came to this song properly for Carl Sinfield's Sing Yonder CD, didn't you?
I sure did, and I couldn't have been more pleased to do it. It's such a cool project, and it's such a fun thing. And he sent a list to people that he wanted to participate in the first ever Sing Yonder audio volume. and I was very happy to be on that list. And I said, oh, I'll do this one because I already know this. And then he was like, well, you can, but the purpose of this is to provide a sort of version of the setting that's in the book, the melody that's in the book, basically, so that people can kind of learn and play along and stuff and follow the sheet music. And I was like, oh. So the first time I recorded this was for Carl, but I used a completely different tune to the one that I usually use. I used Gene Ritchie's tune, which is the one that's in his book, but I kept the original Scots words. I feel like I should say that my version is a Scottish version in broad Scots.
Sure, yeah.
And it's not called Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor, it's called The Dunbrune Bride. So I kept Jean's tune, but I kept my words, because there's a couple of features of that particular text that are so perfect, that I love so much. I was just like, I'm not going to find another version that's as good as this, in my view.
That's fair. But yeah, the Sing Yonder project's really fantastic. The book series. Carl is currently in the middle of sorting out volume 8, which I think is Roud's 71 to 80. So he's a little bit ahead of this podcast.
I mean, he's rattling through them, I think. It's an enormous amount of work. They're so well considered, and I feel see, when you do this for a job, right? When it's your job to record versions of things that umpteen people have done umpteen times before, often perfectly. And you're like, oh, I'll just do it anyway. There's a few kind of like professional benchmarks for me, and one of them is when your version is listed in Mainly Norfolk. The website,
it's
Mainly
a badge
Norfolk.
of honour.
I was honestly beside myself. Absolutely. But my last album went into the UK album charts, like the official, not the folk album, but the actual album charts at number 40. And that was not as good as finding my my name on the Mainly Norfolk website. But I'm also cited not once but twice, but thrice in the Sing Yonder series, and that is up there. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
For my versions to be cited.
I mentioned once in Sing Yonder, I think volume 2 maybe. So a badge of honour. It's a badge of honour, as is Mainly Norfolk. It's not just your name in Mainly Norfolk. Like it's when your own sleeve notes that you wrote turn up.
Right.
There, it's like I wrote that, and someone I've never heard of put it up there.
I know, it's so wonderful. It's so wonderful to see your sleeve notes up there. And I also I have only really provided sleeve notes for our first Bird Ellen album. I don't really do like comprehensive sleeve notes.
Right.
For lots of reasons. If people want to know about the work, they can ask me. Sometimes I include the Roud number and stuff in the sleeve, but I don't do sleeve notes because I don't want you to imagine it outside of the context that I'm putting it in.
That's fair enough. That's a fair enough reason.
tightly controlled environment. But my sleeve notes, my Sing Yonder sleeve notes for this song are on Mainly Norfolk. So a double whammy.
Oh, there you go. You've made it.
Je suis en arrivé, yeah.
But just wondering. Right then, so yeah, your version. So the version that you recorded for this podcast, the melody for that's the one you already knew, rather than the one you did for
that's the melody
Sing
that
Yonder.
comes from Gordina McCulloch, who I think was given it by Pete Shepherd, the great Pete Shepherd.
Ah, Pete Shepherd. All hail Pete Shepherd.
What a wonderful man he is.
He's one of my heroes. I've told this story in gigs a lot, but the trio he had of him and Arthur Watson and Tom Spears is more or less the reason why I'm doing folk music for a living.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Despite the fact that I grew up with folk music in the house and my dad's a melodeon player and everything, but I sort of saw Shepherd, Spears and Watson on stage at Whitby Folk Week, and they sang Jock Hawk's Adventures, and by the end of the first chorus, I thought, right, I'm doing this for a living. And I don't know why it just hit me, and I thought, this is absolutely awesome. I've got to devote the rest of my life to this.
Does
So,
he know that? Does
Pete
Pete know
Shepherd.
that?
Oh yes, Tom doesn't. I haven't seen Tom in a long time, but I've seen Pete and Arthur most years at Whitby Folk Week, and I introduced them on stage once by telling that story, and
Oh, that's so nice.
they were amused and bemused and no and lots of other emotions. But yeah,
He's
no,
so
I've
gorgeous.
duetted with Pete Shepherd occasionally at Whitby as well, and sung a song with him. And yeah, what a legend, what a guy.
I've been very fortunate to be the guest artiste on a digital version of Fife Sing.
I haven't done Fife yet. I haven't done Fife yet. I've been.
Haven't done the in-person one.
No, I was in person at the Killarney singing weekend that Ian Russell runs back in 2017. That was a real highlight of my life.
There's very few places left in this world, this sorry excuse for a country, where you can go and like really just do nothing but sing and hear like the purest, like the most kind of like dyed in the wool versions, like songs that people have had from their actual mothers and stuff, like just all weekend. That's just all you're immersed in. Like it's a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic thing to still be able to do.
Absolutely, I was so honoured to go to drive 10 hours from Sheffield up to Killarney and back to do that, and it was glorious. Just a whole weekend of unaccompanied singing, and really one of the highlights of my life.
Really
there's a handful of things that really rank high in my life. One of which was being in a Disney film, and one of which was one is never going to not be the highlight of my life, and one was singing at Killarney. Just wonderful.
Yeah, we should probably contextualise this by saying Pete Shepherd runs Fife Sing.
He does. He runs the Fife Sing.
And it's attendance sort of monthly digital folk club.
And he's in charge of the Springtime Records, isn't he?
Yes.
The CDs.
Yes.
Which highly recommend buying the entire catalogue.
He's the real deal as well in terms of like collection and stuff. This version.
The work he's done is just,
unreal.
Exemplary.
This version that he gave to Gordina is, I think, pretty much the only Scots version of this that still kind of clings on to this day. Like people are still recording it, and they're recording it exactly as it was given, basically.
Yes, which is no need for any amendments or alterations.
Right. Although there's a couple of versions that don't have a particular verse in it, which I'm interested to talk about. But it's perfect. It's a perfect thing. It's a great melody and a great story.
So to talk about that then. Talk about what you like about it, what you love about it so much.
Well, the first thing that I really liked about it was Gordina's introduction. So there's a recording of her on stage at a folk club, I think, that is part of the Topen and Dulci's Kisterich's School of Scottish Studies digital archive.
Oh, riddle me, dear Mary says, come riddle me all away, no, whether to marry the Dunbrun bride or fetch fair Annie hamo. Well, the Dunbrun bride, she's horse and kye, fair Annie, she's good no. And if you would take your old mother's advice, you would bring the Dun bride hamo.
She does quite a long preamble in which she outlines the events of the song. Steve Roud has very helpfully given us already an outline of the events of this song. So what she says is that something to the effect of, I wouldn't take anything to do with any of the three of them.
Okay.
She says that Lord Thomas is a wimp who's spends too much time worrying about what his mammy thinks, and she's not sure why either of these women would be bothered a fig for him. Anyway, it was a great introduction. And she also says, I hope you've been for a pee, because it's like 18 verses long. And I was like, this sounds like exactly the sort of thing that I would like to do with my time. I love this version because although it is long, there's no fat on it at all. Every verse turns the action over, every single one. And it's a 4-line melody, but it doesn't feel like a 4-line melody somehow. The tune that I recorded for the Sing Yonder compilation, Gene Ritchie's tune, is an 8-line melody. And it gives, even though I used the exact same text, it feels like half the length somehow. I don't know. I really love the way that it kind of goes along. The melodies are quite unusual as well, and it just ticks over and ticks over and ticks over. But there's one passage in particular. So all the normal things happen. He says to his mommy, "Who should I marry?" She says the rich one. And then he, for some reason, goes to his ex-girlfriend's house and says, "Oh, by the way, I'm getting married to somebody else. You should come." Yeah, she goes to her mother and says, "Should I go?" And her mother says, "You are friendless in this world and it would be insane for you to go." And she says, "There are mony there that are my friends and mony more are foes, oh. But should I live or should I die, to the wedding I will go." Right? The drama.
Wow.
She's bringing it.
Yeah.
So she dresses herself all in the white and her merry maids all in green. And when she rides through the countryside to this wedding, she it was mistaken for a queen everywhere she goes, right? That's so far so normal. But then there's this one verse that says, "She's 24 milk-white swans, atwixt her and the sun, oh. And she's 24 milk-white steeds, atwixt her and the moon, oh." So I was like, whoa.
That's fantastic.
So cool. It's so cool. But there's a couple of versions that don't include that verse. And I'm like, why would you not include that verse? It's like the absolute best thing that happens in the whole song. So I used to sing this live a lot as part of the Bordelon set, especially in the kind of early days. And when I introduce it, I'm quite a visual learner, right? The way that I remember these big long songs is that I build like quite a clear visual story in my head. So for me, what happens is that she takes this momentous decision to go to the wedding, and she gets on her horse and she undergoes this process of like magical transmogrification. She becomes this magical creature, and all of these like attendant animals are between her and the sun and the moon, and she moves through the landscape, and she is in this act of becoming. By standing up for herself, she enters this like incredible state of becoming, and by the time she gets there, she is a queen and she's ready for absolutely anything. And I imagine her so there's another song that I associate quite closely with this in my head. And that's a song from FKA Twigs' first EP, and it's called Weak Spot. And it goes, "I know he's got a weak spot for you. I know he's gonna come right back." Right, so in my head, she gets on her horse and she becomes FKA Twigs, because thematically it's very similar. She gets on her horse and she becomes urban music star FKA Twigs. And so that I used to like to do that little bit of introduction when I was singing it. But that's what happens. That's the visual for me. And then when she gets to the wedding, the exchange of insults in this version is also stellar. So the Dunbroom bride turns to Lord Thomas and says, "Whither did ye get thon watery floor that washed ye say white o?" So where did you get this pale slip of a thing that has like turned you white as a sheet? From whence have you swept this in?
Blimey.
Right, which is great. And then Annie turns round.
Sauce there, yeah.
Right? Annie turns round to her and she goes, "I got it in my mother's ain womb, where you never saw sick like." Right? So my ma's better than your ma.
that it all boils down to
Let's
that,
get it popping. Let's go outside. Now, if you imagine in your head the idea of FKA Twigs standing in a medieval Scottish church hall saying, I got it in my mother's own womb where you never saw sick like. It's quite the picture. It's quite the picture. Yeah. I think it's perfect. I think it's a perfect text. And it's not very often that happens. It's not very often that I come across a piece of music like this, especially a long one, especially one that has so many iterations, so many choices, that I don't feel the need to do some editing, but I sing it exactly as Gordina does. Exactly.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it really is fantastic.
It's a perfect
and then
thing.
there's the whole thing about the brown girl, the brune bride in your case. You know, it's
Yeah.
it's a whole debate, isn't it?
Yeah. So I was always given to understand that it wasn't a reference to her ethnicity. I was always given to understand it was a reference to the fact that she was coarse, right? That she was unrefined. And Eleanor's fairness was to do with the fact that she stayed indoors. That was always my understanding of it. And by virtue of staying indoors, that meant that she was just a wee bit fancier. Also, you know, the Dunbrune Bride has more horses and lands than Kai. And that's why he's encouraged to marry her. So it's not that she's not rich, it's that she's coarse.
Yeah.
And it kind of, which is, you know, my privilege showing, it kind of didn't ever really occur to me that it would not mean that. Do you know what I mean? But Angeline Morrison and I were having a conversation about it on Twitter, and she's like, no, it's very much a racial thing. And I was like, oh, shit. I just, that's not again, that's not the visual that I have in my head at all. And yeah, it's never been my understanding. So I'm more than happy to be corrected on that always, right? It's not, it's definitely not for me to argue about it.
And then Steve Roud was saying earlier that a lot of times when it came to women being referred to as fair, it a lot of times meant the colour of their hair rather than anything else, you know.
Yeah. I mean...
So there is that angle as well. That potential, you know.
I think, like, then you know, it becomes slightly more obvious that blonde-haired, blue-eyed women are superior to dark-haired, dark-eyed women. And then you're like, oh, wait.
Oh, yeah, whoops.
Hang on. Yeah, I always thought her fairness was that she was pale and also that she was bonny, like bonny to look at, like fair to look at, rather than her colouring. Yeah. But yeah, I'm, you know, always happy to be educated. And Angeline's done buckets and buckets of work on this very subject.
Well, absolutely, yes. Yeah, of course.
But it's definitely not how I see them in my mind.
Sure. And then they all die at the end.
They sure do. In
one by one, in any order that someone sees fit to sing, I suppose.
Right, you're right. There's lots of different variants, lots of different versions of how they die. Caroline Hughes has got, I think, when they have that exchange between the two women, Thomas kills one of them first and then the other one kills Thomas. I don't know, I can't remember, but she has it a weird way around. In my version, the Dunbrune Bride has a wee penknife and it hangs down by her side, oh, and she's ta'en it through fair Annie's heart, and ne'er a word she cried, oh. And then the exact same thing happens to the Dunbrune Bride, except Lord Thomas, he's a guy broadsword, and it hangs down by his side, oh, and he's ta'en it through the Dunbride's heart, and ne'er a word she cried, oh. Which is nice. I like that little pair of verses. But
Yeah,
Lord
great.
Thomas does die, but my version's not explicit about how he dies. He says that you should just dig a grave for him and bury both these women in beside him, which I think is an affront.
It's certainly a decision.
Who is this guy? But see,
So-
for me, like, this song has got nothing to do with Thomas or the woman that he's marrying or anybody's mother or anything like that. For me, like, what is at the core of this song? It's irrelevant, actually, that they all die. That's not what this song's about for me at all. What this song is about is the, real or preternatural or supernatural becoming that happens for Annie when she decides to stand up for herself and call his bluff and be her own woman and show her face and ignore the advice of everyone around her and ignore the fact that she's been badly treated and just like goes and like represents like and what that does for her as a person, the growth that she has and the transformation that she undergoes in that process is everything that this song is about for me.
Right. That's brilliant. Are there any modern or revival singer versions that you would recommend to our listeners?
I think I just mentioned Queen Caroline Hughes there.
Oh,
She's given 2 versions of this over the years. One is on that topic, Voice of the People. I think it's volume 12? I'm a Romany Rye.
Romany Rye is part of the. It's
That's
like
Voice of the
technically it's
People.
23 or something. It's in the stuff that came after the 20 volumes of Voice of the People. It's in the somewhere. Slight aside, obviously there's the Voice of the People. The topic put out is 20 volumes of traditional singing and music, and then there's a further 10 volumes that aren't numbered. They're just other albums, and I'm a Romany Rye is one of those following 10 that aren't numbered.
Well,
I played a clip of that exact recording of Caroline Hughes singing Lord Thomas of Eleanor earlier in this episode.
What's so great about it for me is that it's, I think, just shy of 2 minutes long.
There you go. Nothing
She's
is not
just
succinct.
like, this happens, that happens, the oddie. Which is really great. It's a really lovely contrast. I also, in terms of like more kind of sourcey type recordings, Texas Gladden gave a song called Lord Thomas to, I think, Alan Lomax in 1941, and you can find that in his archive. It's a great version because everything that Texas Gladden does is magical. One of the all-time greats, one of my all-time favourite singers.
Amazing, yeah. We heard a clip of Texas Gladden back in episode 2.
Oh, yeah.
And, absolutely amazing voice.
She's got very similar taste to me in terms of like the songs that if I ever am like super interested in doing something, I'd look it up and there's almost always a Texas Gladden version. So we're ploughing the same furrow, which is quite good. And what I particularly like about Texas's version is that Eleanor, Annie, Annette, whoever you want to call her, decides to go to the wedding of her own volition. Thomas doesn't invite her. She just is like, I'm just going to go. What do you mean he's getting married to somebody else? We'll see about that. She turns up uninvited.
Oh, that's great.
Full EastEnders.
Brilliant.
I would encourage people to look up Gordina's version on the Kist o Riches or Topper and Dulcish website, which is the publicly available digital archive of the School of Scottish Studies in Edinburgh. An incredible resource for all kinds of things, songs and stories. There's lots of wonderful, wonderful storytelling on there, and little kind of snippets of people talking about folklore and stuff like that. Anyway, her version's on there because she's also recorded it separately with the Clutha in, I think, 1996 or something, which was her band, Glasgow band.
Right. Lovely, yeah. And then I would throw into that some English versions. Martin Simpson recorded Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor. Martin Carthy and Dave Swarbrick did Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor. And the great Peter Bellamy did Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor as well. And yeah, those three are fantastic versions as well.
If Martin Carthy and Peter Bellamy have not sung it, then it's not a real song.
Well, I mean, we had that realization on episode 1. John Bowden and I realized he didn't, or at least never recorded any version of the Raggle Taggle Gypsies.
Wait, what? Who? Pete Bellamy?
Peter Bellamy.
No.
As far as we're aware, there's
no way.
Because John said that any modern version recommends, and if there's a Bellamy one, we'll recommend that one, and we couldn't.
No way. That astonishes me. I feel astonished by that. I also feel determined to go and find it.
I know exactly what
I feel like it must exist.
Well, set up a campaign for that.
I might literally get off this call and get on Twitter and be like, lads, who can tell me? Someone will know.
Yeah, because I've got pretty much every single, at least official release of Bellamy's, and yeah, there's nothing, not there. Wild. Not even in like 7 Yellow Gypsies or any other title,
Yeah.
Huh. But there is him singing Lord Thomas and Fair Eleanor, which is great. So very pleased that one exists.
His version's good, isn't it? There's also as I said, I think in the beginning, that Alistair Roberts recommended that I learn this song, and he used to sing it just with guitar. And I'm not sure if he ever recorded that version of it. His guitar part's beautiful. If you can find him singing it live on YouTube. Check out his boyish charm. He's but a bairn.
Well, I'll take that as a recommendation for everything of Alistair Roberts, because
but he also recorded it much more recently. I think maybe 2018 or something. It came out on an album called What News, which is a record that he made with an electronic artist called Amble Skews, and a guy called David McGuinness, who's a lecturer in music at Glasgow University, but he's also part of Concerto Caledonia and does historically accurate music, a lot of Bach on Bach era instruments and stuff like that. He's a piano player. It's a wonderful, wonderful record, expansive and interesting, and their version of the Dunbroom Bride is on that and is very good. Definitely worth your time.
Right, yeah, well, there'll be links to all these in the episode notes.
Yeah, so, Ali Roberts might be the kind of modern day equivalent of, if he hasn't done it, it's no real. He's quite prolific as well.
I'll hold him to that.
I think he's maybe done like 10 or 10 albums of traditional music, something like that. Like a lot.
Wow.
A lot.
That's brilliant. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this. Unless you've got anything else you want to talk about in relation to this?
I don't think so. I wish that more people would sing it. I understand that, it's not for everyone in lots of respects. And maybe there's a way round. Maybe there's a more inventive way round some of the more problematic aspects of it. I would be interested to hear some of the young team having a go at that. That would be good. But it's such a ripping yarn. It's a great song.
Yeah, for the rest of it, it's really fantastic. It's just got some odd moments. But I think we'll leave it there then. Where after we say goodbye, we'll listen to you singing it, singing the Dunbrew Bride on the recording you gave us. And that's great, I have to say. Love it.
Oh, I'm glad. It's just a great song. It's hard to get up, Many have tried, I'm sure.
Many, well, yes, indeed. So it is naming no names. Right, yeah, that's the end then of that. But yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. It's my favourite thing to do. Nerding out.
Cheers.
Come riddle me, mother, he said. Come riddle me all Eleanor. It's whether should I marry the Dunbrun bride, or fetch fair Annie hamo. The Dunbrun bride's got horse and kye, fair Annie, she's got nano. And if you'll take your old mother's advice, you'll bring the Dun bride hamo. He's dressed himself all in the green, his merry men all in white, oh. And every town that they came by, they took him for some night, oh. And when he's reached fair Annie's gate, he's tuddled low at the pen, oh. There was Nancy ready as Annie herself to rise and let him in, oh. What news, Lord Thomas, she said. What news hae you for me, oh? I've come to bid you to my wedding, and that's sad news for thee, oh. Sad news indeed, she said, the saddest you could tell, oh. It's gay sad news indeed, she said, should have been the bride herself, oh. Come riddle me, mother, she said, come riddle me all Eleanor. It's whether should I gang to Lord Thomas's wedding, or just now stay at home, oh. Lord Thomas, he's got friends enough, fair Annie, you've got nano. And if you'll take your old mother's advice, you'll just now stay at home, oh. There's money there that are my friends, and money more are foes, oh. But should I live or should I die, to the wedding I will go. She's dressed herself all in the white, her merry maids all in green, oh. And every town that they came by, they took her for some queen, oh. She's 24 milk white swans atwixt her and the sun, oh. She's 24 milk white steeds atwixt her and the moon, oh. And when she's reached Lord Thomas's gate, she's tuddled low at the pen, oh. There was Nancy ready as Thomas himself to rise and let her in, oh. He's ta'en her by the lily white hand, he's led her through the hollow. He sat her down in a chair of goud amongst her maidens all, oh. Then up and spoke the Dunbrun bride, and it's oh sae bold, says she, oh. It's whether did ye get on watery floor that washed ye sae white, oh. Then up and spoke fair Annie hersel, and it's oh sae bold, says she, oh. I got it in my mother's ain womb, where you never saw sic like, oh. The Dunbrun bride's a wee penknife, it hangs down by her side, oh. She's ta'en it through fair Annie's heart, and ne'er a word she cried, oh. Lord Thomas, he's a gay broadsword, it hangs down by his side, oh. He's ta'en it through the dun bride's heart, and ne'er a word she cried, oh. It's dig a grave, Lord Thomas, he said, it's dig it wide and deep, oh, and bury fair Annie at my side, and the dun bride at my feet, oh.
That was Debbie Armour singing The Dunbrune Bride. And that's it. That's the end of episode 4. What did you think? What are your thoughts on the song? Do you have any other versions that you're really keen on? I'd love to hear from you. Drop us an email at intheroud@singyonder.co.uk or visit us on the various social medias. Just search for In the Roud, a folk song podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd very much appreciate it if you would give us a little rating and review on wherever you get your podcasts from. That really helps us to reach a wider audience. One last huge thanks to this week's guests, Steve Roud and Debbie Armour. Join me next time for episode 5. We'll be looking at Roud 5, which is the song The Three Ravens. My historical guest will be Steve Gardam, and my singer guest will be Rosie Hodgson. That's it from me. Stay safe, be well, and I'll see you next time in the Roud.